Hello, my name is Max Behrer and I'm an independent Scientologist. And this video is an introduction to what's going on in the Church of Scientology and what's going on in the independent field called Free Zone or in the independent Scientology. There are also other movements which have given up any association with Scientology and call it something else. Like Harry Palmer, he calls his movement Avatar. And his Avatar masters deliver services which can be compared with OT abilities. I talk about that a bit later. Now I first want to introduce myself and where I came from. I'm, as you can hear on my accent, I'm from Germany, or more exactly from Bavaria. And I used to live in Munich, and on one day I walked through the mall of Munich in the evening, and a lovely girl approached me and asked a few questions and invited me to a test center where I did a personality test. I bought the Dianetic book and signed up for the communication course. I was then very happy on the completion of that course. It really improved my life. And because of that good results, you carry on to the next course. And the course which I could afford at that time was the Hubbard Qualified Scientologist course. It is a combination of course and auditing. I received auditing from another student on level 1, and in exchange I gave auditing in a very simple form out of the book Self-Analysis List. Now, auditing is a very simple communication process. You ask the person, the client, or as they call it, pre-clear. That's because the person has not received the state of clear, and therefore it's called the pre-clear. You ask a question and you get an answer and acknowledge that person for the answer. So that's basically what you need to know about auditing right now. I was also very happy with the completion of the Hubbard Qualified Scientologist course, so I moved on. And the next thing was professional auditing in 1997. It was called Life Repair. As the name suggests, it's an individual program where aspects of your life which need to be confronted are treated. And I was happy and said I want more of that auditing. But at that stage I could not afford it. And so I did a course called Study Technology. And I then got a bit offline because I visited a business college in Black Forest. And I was the best of the class. And I think it has to do with the study technology which I applied on that course as much as possible, or in my time after the class. And yeah, I was even in the newspaper for completing that course as the best of the class. Returning to Munich, a few things have changed. There was a new program that was called the Purification Program, which deals with the drugs accumulated in the body. Now, I have never taken any drugs except a bit too much alcohol occasionally and painkillers next morning. But at that particular time I had dental treatment and I got some anesthetic. So you can get rid of the leftovers of these drugs in your body and you feel much better. And after that, there was a new program called the Survival Co-Audit course, which in the Church of Scientology does no longer exist. But I was happy with that course and I found it a good way to move on without spending too much money. After that, I became a staff member, but only for 2 days. The reason was that I left is that I would have to sign up for courses which I was told they are free as part of a 5-year staff contract. But what they didn't tell me is that I would have to sign so-called non-payment invoices. And if you do not complete your 5-year contract, they would present you a freeloader bill and you would have to pay all these courses you have done or you would not be allowed to continue. Of course, that threat works only as long as someone believes that these services are only available in the Church of Scientology. And but that's not true. Scientology doesn't really have a monopoly anymore. No matter how hard they try with all their trademarks and so on, but that's not a real reason. I have already given some examples that Scientology is under this name available in the so-called free zone by independent Scientologists, or it's called something else. So anyway, before I get deeper involved in it, I thought I'd get out of it. And I left for lunch and did not return. And of course that's a very heavy penalty, but I thought they should have told me such things. Then I wouldn't have signed up in the first place. But it's not done that way. The recruitment methods are very ruthless. So I had to go through what was called the lower ethics condition, and I had to do certain things, I won't get into it, in order to be able to continue as a public Scientologist, which I did, and I studied level 0. That's the first major level in the auditor training. And then in 1982 I migrated to Australia, and after some English studies I continued with level 1, 2, 3 and 4. And there was another new course that was called the Professional TIAS course. That's a communication training course. But as the name suggests, it's more professional than the course for the beginners. Then I decided to become an auditor in 2 languages. And so I had this idea to return to Munich, because when I left in 1982, the Church of Scientology in Munich, in German called Scientology Kirche, had 200 staff members. But when I arrived, I had to realize it crashed, and there were only 40 staff members left. So many of them were not allowed for some reasons to receive any auditing at that stage. So it was difficult to complete my internship there. So I returned to Australia. They needed a course supervisor. And when I returned, I had no job, so I was willing to do it without joining staff. I mean, I got the weekly interviews to join staff, but I told them that's a no-no. and then they recommended that I should go to Sydney to the new advanced organization and do my internship there. But before I left for Sydney, I was invited to watch a video about new developments in California. And I then found out, oh, these are not any longer Scientologists, these are ex-Scientologists. But that's a bit the wrong name, because they didn't give up Scientology, they only gave up their membership to the Church of Scientology, or they left the Sea Org, or have been thrown out, like David Mayer, the personal auditor of Ron Hubbard himself. He was declared a suppressive person. What a nonsense. And anyway, he was running that center in Santa Barbara. And while watching the video, I saw a lady which I didn't see in Munich when I was there. She was on the video. So I went to Sydney, started my internship at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and at the coffee break I was told that I have to go and see the ethics department. And they had a long list of people who watched that video. And that must have been very bad in their sight. But it reminded me of communist East Germany. The East Germans were not allowed to watch the West German TV. So they had to keep their TV antenna under the roof, so that the secret police passing by didn't see any suspicion. If you had an antenna on the roof directed to the west, then they would have investigated. And it's a bit like here, you shouldn't watch a video. You shouldn't find out. Yeah. So I did not agree with them, and because I mentioned the situation in communist East Germany, they obviously decided that I need an auditing action called rollback. So I went into session with that guy, and when he explained to me about the rollback, and I said, sorry, I don't want to roll back, I want to roll forward. And that's why I'm leaving, so that I'm not stopped any longer. Anyway, it all worked out, and next morning I got a refund for my internship. It was a check of about $1,400. And while I was walking down to the Commonwealth Bank to lodge my check, Hare Krishna people came up and distributed 2 books freely. So I was reading in these books and they said, I need only one process to go free. And that would be the Hare Krishna mantra. So I walked through a big park and there was no one around. So I said, oh, I may frighten the birds, but I try it out. And I must say, after 10 minutes, I felt free. All these changes, they easily cause a bit, some people call it upsets. In Scientology, they call it ERC breaks. And that was gone. And I could happily be in present time after singing that Hare Krishna mantra. Quite an interesting experience, and absolutely free, you don't have to pay for it. Now, earlier, in 1983, I already experienced some things I did not agree. One was that if a pre-clear reveals something confidential in session, you would write a knowledge report. The example which was given, a staff member is stealing a book. And he tells the auditor he feels a bit guilty. But the common justification was that the pay was so low that they couldn't afford to buy books, because the book prices did rise too in the early 80s. And another thing was that this violates the auditor's code. While you should keep it confidential, but the administration of the church would say, oh, you must write a knowledge report to the ethics officer about that theft of the book. So that wasn't good. Another example was that I have been told that my lifelong membership was invalid because there is a new one. And if I don't get the new one, here a threat again, then your certificates would declared invalid. Luckily they didn't push it, and so I still did go to Munich and try to get the internship, but that would have been invalid too. But anyway, as I left the organization, I didn't really care if they declare anything invalid. So that were some of the experiences. And from the early 80s, what's happened was that a guy called David Miscavic, who did grow up as a child in the Church of Scientology, and that seems to be not a good environment for rising children. And I then heard about a conference in Europe is coming up in Switzerland of independent Scientologists. So I plan to go there via United States and visit the Advanced Ability Center in Santa Barbara, run by David Meyer. And I was very pleased what I saw there. You know, all the pressure gone. And at that conference in Switzerland, there were also guests from the United States, people who worked with Ron in the 50s. And I heard from one guy that it was completely different in the 50s. But Ron Hubbard had a bad experience when his son left the Church of Scientology and left the family. What must have been a shocking experience for him, and that has led then to developments where he became more authoritarian, more militaristic, and he never visited a business college, and so he didn't get any other methods how to run an organization. So the Church of Scientology became quite militaristic. But I must say, until the early 80s, I didn't experience it personally, except for my 2 days on staff. Yeah. So this guy, David Miscavic, he is a big problem for the Church of Scientology and its staff members and public members, because he seems to be having the false purpose. He runs the Church of Scientology like a real estate agent, buying and selling property, doing lots of renovations in order to create something what he calls the ideal org. But the purpose of Scientology is not to have big buildings and doing all the renovations. The purpose is to train lots of auditors so that you can audit more and more people. That's the only way you can, what they call, clear the planet. Yep. And, and that's missing. So because of all these things on the high prices and eligibility tests for OT levels, you don't need to develop your OT qualities. You don't need OT eligibility, which is basically only security checking. Yeah. That's not necessary. So more and more people became dissatisfied with the management and had got the feeling this is suppression, and it is. So thousands or even 10,000s left then in the early 80s, and I was, as I told you, one of them. But there are still people in Scientology who believe that they cannot leave. And there are two main reasons. One is they get fixated that only the Church of Scientology can deliver these services up to clear and OT and also all the training courses. But this is not true. The monopoly is broken. There are so many independent Scientologists now out there, and all the materials are on the internet, freely available. And I just recently found a site where I could download all the OT levels. And I read them, and I must say, I didn't get sick. And I wasn't dying from them either. And I have really some question marks about it. Then here in Australia, there is a guy, he is from the Australian ABC TV station, and he has written a book about the conditions of Scientology in Australia, and he calls it Fair Game. That's his book. Now, I have in recent times done some investigation, and one thing journalists, politicians and others, they always talk about what Scientology is doing or not doing. Yeah. But Scientology is defined as an applied religious philosophy existing in books, on CDs and DVDs, which contain lectures of Hubbard, and they are not doing anything to people. It's always people who do something. Yeah. Or not do something. Yeah. So it's not the Scientology. So Scientology doesn't harm people. But there are people like David Miscavic, they are definitely harming people. Yeah. So if you want to attack someone, don't attack Scientology. Find out who is doing it and attack them. You have to attack a person. While the philosophy is not doing anything to you. It's not possible. Yeah. But besides that, I'm now in my 70s and I have decided that I will make my contribution. So I have written this book, that was already in 2002 published, and I will do more. And I have decided not to use the word Scientology or independent Scientology. I will choose a different name for my philosophy, and I will tell you more about that in my next video. So I think that's all I have for you today. And I thank you for your attention. Bye bye now.